So workplace trauma is basically any trauma that you have experienced in the workplace. And it can be, like a one-off traumatic event, or it can be ongoing trauma, like emotional or physical abuse or gaslighting, boundary crossing, sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, and just even, unfair workloads or working overtime without, the proper compensation for that. And so it's basically anything, that makes you feel unsafe in your workplace, and whether that's mentally, emotionally, physically. And yeah, it's just any trauma experience in the workplace.
Welcome to the You Are Not Your Trauma podcast, a show that reminds you that you are not alone, your experiences matter, and you are not defined by what you've been through. Each week, you will hear from the host and invited guests who have either personal or professional experience with trauma. They will share their stories and strategies for overcoming past wounds and beginning the journey toward healing and wholeness. Now, here's your host, a gifted speaker, author, coach, and entrepreneur, Harriet M. Harris.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of You Are Not Your Trauma, the podcast that brings hope, healing, and inspiration to those who have experienced some of life's most challenging moments. I'm your host, Harriet M. Harris, and I am so glad that you're here today. I hope that this show is an important part of your healing journey. Now, today we're zeroing in on an issue that affects countless people: workplace trauma. We'll explore how to undo the damage it inflicts and how to find your path to self-love. Our guest is someone who's not only walked this path, but has also become a guiding light for others. So sit back, relax, and prepare to be inspired. Now, joining me today is Miss Lindsey Maza. After an 8-year career in the high-pressure fashion industry, Lindsey experienced burnout and became the very thing she dreaded: a toxic leader. However, the wheel turned, and after intense healing, she founded a movement committed to bringing empathy, compassion, and trust back into the workplace. Lindsey, I am beyond thrilled to have you here today. Thank you so much. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you. So, Lindsey, would you begin just by telling us a little bit about you and what you do now?
Yeah, so I am Lindsey, and I am a certified self-love coach, leadership coach, and Reiki master. And now I empower professional women in the workplace to become effective, impactful leaders without sacrificing their well-being. And we do that through foundational self-love practices.
I am super excited to hear more about that. We're going to take a very quick commercial break, and we will be right back.
Want a chance to win exclusive You Are Not Your Trauma merch? Here's how. Leave a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform and share your thoughts with us. It helps us reach more listeners who may also be seeking healing and growth. Once you left your feedback, visit feedback.youarenotyourtrauma.com to let us know you've entered by entering your info and the word feedback in the message section. You could be a lucky winner. Now stay tuned for today's inspiring episode, and thank you for being a part of the You Are Not Your Trauma community.
Okay, and we are back. So for those who might not be, who may have just joined into this episode, I am speaking with Lindsey, and we're going to be talking about workplace trauma. So Lindsey, for those who might not be familiar with workplace trauma, can you define what that is and how it manifests?
Yeah, so workplace trauma is basically any trauma that you have experienced in the workplace. And it can be, like a one-off traumatic event, or it can be ongoing trauma, like emotional or physical abuse or gaslighting, boundary crossing, sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, and just even, unfair workloads or working overtime without, the proper compensation for that. And so it's basically anything, that makes you feel unsafe in your workplace, and whether that's mentally, emotionally, physically. And yeah, it's just any trauma experience in the workplace.
So at what point did you realize, like, then, because you named a lot of different things, right? So you named a lot of things that I think a lot of us experience when we are in the workplace. At what point did you decide, like, understand that it was, a traumatic situation that you were dealing with?
Honestly, not until like 3 or 4 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's just, you don't understand that it's happening. At least for me personally, I didn't understand it was happening while I was in it.
Wow. Okay. So can you share with us your journey, specifically like focusing on how you transitioned from experiencing that burnout and the workplace trauma to cultivating self-love?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, my career journey is I used to live in Iowa and I moved out to LA to work in the fashion industry. And that's what I majored in school. And so I moved out here, no friends, no job, like no anything, just knew I wanted, like the love for fashion. And from there, I just worked my way up, and then I found myself in this amazing job. And at a really young age, at age 26, I was given a ton of responsibility, and I was managing like national retailers. I was managing up to 70 sales reps who were twice my age. And I was basically managing like a whole wholesale department. And that is what led to my burnout. And I worked so hard, and I put all of, like my worth and my value into my job and what I was achieving, that I just kept working. And then of course, on top of that, a toxic workplace and a toxic boss who's drilling that into you almost every day. So it's like set up for failure basically. But, from there, unfortunately, I went to an even more toxic job. And then I honestly didn't understand the cycle of trauma that was happening to me until the pandemic hit. And it was the first time in my life that I was able to pause and just be like, wait, what just happened over the last 8 years, And it just, without that, I always wonder like where I would be, because that gave me the chance to just slow down and recognize all of the trauma that did happen to me. So yeah, basically through the workplace and through my own doing is just what created this burnout, unfortunately.
Wow. So you've talked a little bit about some of the things you experienced. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your personal experience with the workplace trauma and like how it actually impacted your emotional well-being?
Definitely. I mean, first of all, I just want to say, like, I was always that girl, especially in college and like, moving to LA, I was like, I will never be in an emotionally abusive relationship. Like, I will never let myself be part of that. And I did through workplace. And sometimes you don't realize that's an abusive relationship. And honestly, it was just really like a slow burn. It wasn't every single day. It just happened in small little, like transgressions over time. It definitely started like right when I first started working there with love bombing and, giving me gifts, paying me extra, giving me bonuses, giving me opportunities over other people at work. So I was like, oh, I'm the shining star. Like I'm their favorite employee. And so I felt really special. After a while, it moved on to like the isolation part of it where they're like, oh, since I was already felt like their favorite, then it started with like, oh, like no one else in the office likes you. So basically like isolating me from everyone else. So like I would do anything that they said, because then now they're my only lifeline at work. And like when my work wife left, because she was like, this is toxic, I'm out of here. They're like, well, you don't know the real Barbara. I'm just making up names. You don't know the real Barbara. Like she was different with you than with other people. So like I saw that was a really good friend that I just stopped talking to because I trusted them. So isolating me from people outside of the company too, after they left. And it was like just really like, I remember one time I forgot to send a line sheet like in a timely manner to a national retailer, and literally they called me and berated me over an extension, like just called me over the phone. We're the only two people in the office, a small office. Like I can hear you in your office, but called me, berated me about sending a line sheet. And this was probably like 7:30 at night. So I'm there way past when I need to be there doing all of this work. And, you know, instead of being like, oh, thank you so much for staying late and sending out our new line sheet, berated me, hung up on me and called me back and berated me again and hung up on me. And of course, I started sobbing, and they come around to like leave the office, and they're like, well, why are you crying? You know, like no empathy or just like self-awareness. I'm like, what do you mean? Why am I crying? You just screamed at me and like verbally abused me over a line sheet. And like, it was just a lot of stuff like that. And then obviously like every single day was just a loss of basic autonomy, you know, like micromanaging. Anything I did was micromanaged. So it would take me like 30 minutes to like send an email because I was like, it has to be perfect or I'm going to get G-chatted and screamed at, and no boundaries whatsoever. I had to be on call all the time, 24/7, would call me after work, text me before work. I was supposed to work on my vacation. Like it was expected. I wasn't allowed a vacation. Like literally I remember being like, okay, well, the people in the warehouse like don't have to work on their vacation. Why do I have to? And they were like, well, you make too much money to not work on your vacation, which is just ridiculous. And it was just really things like that. And it wasn't every day, which is what's tough about like this kind of abuse, is like you'd have a whole week where everything was so great and happy and I loved my job, but then those little things over time, and you know, like little comments like, oh, you better watch out, she's going to surpass you, like she made more sales than you, she's going to take your job, like just small stuff like that every single day. So after that builds up, emotionally, I was just a shell of myself. I was really quick to react to anything negative. So like if someone said one negative thing, I'd be like, oh my God, like I'm such a failure, you know. Anxiety. I never slept. Like if I slept through the night, it was a miracle. Depression. I stopped talking to a lot of my friends and my family. Like they had no idea that all of this was going on. I would be fighting with my boyfriend. He's now my husband. Bless him. I'd be fighting with him all the time because I was drinking so much. Like I would go home and drink like almost a whole bottle of wine every single night because I was so stressed out. And that was my coping mechanism. So just a really, you know, unhealthy way of living. And it was just like, I was so disconnected from my body emotionally and physically. And I just was like a shell of a human going about the motions. So, and like still to this day, if I see either of their names anywhere, like I still like kind of start to get panicky and it just sticks with you. So I know that was a lot, but
no, I mean, thank you for sharing, because the thing is, I appreciate you sharing, because the thing is, there is someone else out there that is going through these emotions. You mentioned several different things that that don't sound unfamiliar, right? So the urgency of, you know, someone else is going to surpass you, and then that panicky, because once you start to feel that way and you know you want to remain at the top of your game, you want to, you know, do the best job that you can, you know, that's always going to be that, because once they say it, they can't unsay it. Right. So it's always going to be in the back of your head. You know, you're constantly thinking it. And then again, when the person berated you, you know, called in, you know, so you're constantly thinking of that. Like, I never know. And I recall you saying like, you just still kind of felt a little jumpy. So it's like, you just never know, because your body is now feeling like, okay, if I mess up, if I don't get this done, this sheet out, I can't remember the name of it, but line sheet, I can't get this line sheet out at the right time, this may happen. And then your brain is just kind of preparing you for that. And it's like, wow, because there are other people out there. So I so appreciate you sharing that, because I'm sure that had to have been a very difficult time for you.
It was.
And so you went through that. You isolated yourself from friends and family. You were drinking a lot. And so how did you make the transition? Like at what point, what was the moment that made you realize you needed a shift, but not just in your career, but just in your life?
Yeah, I mean, luckily after that job, I made small shifts because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, that was not who I want to be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I made small shifts of like starting to meditate. Like I meditated on the train on the way to work and, moving my body a little bit more. But unfortunately, after that traumatic experience, I went to a basically even more traumatic experience. And so it just got worse from there. And honestly, I didn't realize it until the pandemic. And I think what the moment was, I was applying for jobs because
Mm-hmm.
2020 was so wild. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll apply for jobs. And I wasn't showing up to the interviews. And that's when I kind of, because I'm not like that. I'm very responsible. I'm like, if you're giving me my time, I'll give you my time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was like, that's not like me. What is going on? So
Right.
I really had to kind of figure out what was happening and where I want to move forward in the future. And that was definitely the moment. And, the pandemic brought out a lot in a lot of people and realized like,
Right.
who we could be, what we could be doing. And,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that was definitely like the defining moment when I was just like, I didn't show up to an interview and that's not like me.
So at what point did you mentioned that you became a toxic boss.
Mhm.
So can you tell us how that kind of transpired and how that made you like feel about what you were actually doing?
Yeah. So it just happened naturally because I had this model of leadership and how a company
Mm,
should be run that you micromanage and that you should probably just do everything yourself. And like I just didn't have that sense of autonomy like I was talking about. So I treated other people like that. Unfortunately. And um I just wasn't taking care of myself. And that is something that I would empower, leaders to do now. But
mhm.
I had to deal with that. Like I had so much guilt and I still do. I had to do a lot of self-forgiveness work, but it was
Mm,
just,
yeah.
I realized, no one wanted to be around me and or they didn't not want to be around me. I think they were scared to be around me. Maybe that's the correct way to say it.
Mm,
Like just how I tiptoed around my bosses, I'm sure they were tiptoeing around me. And just how I have like this PTSD, I have this immense guilt that I pass that on to those people. And it just is so unfortunate. And that's why I do this work now so we can stop and break that cycle of, this toxic, abusive leadership.
that is awesome. I mean, well, I think it's awesome that you were able to realize that it was something that needed to be stopped, and then you put your work began working in the space to shift that,
Mhm.
not just in the work that you do, but in workplaces in general.
Mhm.
So you are a self-love coach. Tell us what that is. Can you give us some more details?
Yeah. So self-love coach basically helps you, love yourself and accept yourself fully, and then take actions to, grow and become your best self. And that can be mind, body, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And it just is this different way of being because when you're your best self, everyone benefits from that. And
Yes.
so it's such important work, and it just is really accepting who you are, even the good and the bad, every part of yourself, and just loving who you are unconditionally.
Something you said, and I'm making a note because I really like it. You said when you're your best self, everyone benefits from it. And can you talk a little bit more about how others can benefit from you being your best self?
Yeah, it just, when you're loving yourself, the energy you put out
Mm,
is so much more positive and happy, and people are going to pick up on that energy. And when
Yes.
you're loving and fully accepting of who you are, you're giving others permission to do that as well. Because, like people have seen my transformation, like my
Mm-hmm.
friends and my family, and written me letters and been like, thank you so much for doing this work. It has seen how I can change in myself as well. And, and then I thought, okay, in leadership, how self-love is like a no-brainer because you're
Mm-hmm.
showing up as your best self. And, and your best self doesn't have to be like toxic positive. It's just
Right.
your best self that day. Maybe you're a 3 on an energy scale. How can you show up as your best self when you're a 3 on an energy scale,
Right.
And it radiates out, and it's like this snowball effect of giving others permission to shine and love and accept who they are. Because when you're feeling that within yourself, you're
Mm-hmm.
accepting others for who they are as well, and any of their shortcomings or what's quirky about them, or like, what makes them, because you've done that for
Yeah.
yourself too.
I like that. I like that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, so Lindsay, in your opinion, how can self-love counteract the toxic elements that we often encounter in the workplace?
Oh, so many ways, but I'll give a few instances. I think definitely, and especially if you're experiencing a toxic or traumatic workplace, is that you know your worth, right? You stand
Mm-hmm.
firm in your self-worth. And, like what I mean from that is like, who you are. And if they're trying to like gaslight you or change your reality, or, tell you didn't do something, you're able to be like, no, that's not the way it happened, and
Mm-hmm.
who you are is more important than the job at hand. And so you're able
Yeah.
to just stand firm in your worth and be like, my productivity, my achievements are
Mm-hmm.
not more important than who I am and what my values are. So I'm not going to let you walk over me, tell me I'm something I'm not. So that's really
Right.
important. Another way is boundaries, of course. We all need boundaries. And, when you know your boundaries, and you will not tolerate like someone stepping all over your boundaries. Like, you're going to leave right at 5 because you want to get home to your loved ones, or you
Right.
just work till 5. Like, that's it. That's like the end of the sentence. I work till 5. I'm going home. And you're able to communicate them clearly and with confidence, because as the last point I made, you're worthy of leaving at 5,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't determine who you are. And then another important thing is trusting yourself and trusting, your reality, trusting your body of work, and trusting your skills. And then, of course, trusting your intuition is so important, because, if your gut's telling you this isn't a good place to work, this isn't going to be good long term, or like if your gut's telling you this is abusive, like I should probably take some steps to, the next step, go to HR, whatever you need to do. So it's really important that you're trusting yourself. So that's just a few instances, but I think those are really all really important.
Those are very important. And you kind of triggered a thought for me. Um, why do people, when they are experiencing, similar, they don't have the boundaries, or they're, too afraid to share their boundaries, why do they stay? Like, what advice, I guess I should say, first I'm going to say, why do they stay? Like, why do they stay in that workplace trauma? Because there are some people who will say, hey, you know what, I don't have to deal with this. I'm moving on to another job. And then there are some people who will say, oh, I just, I'm just going to stay and work, figure it out. So my first question is, why do you think people stay? And then the other is, what advice would you give for those who maybe need to move on, but are too afraid to do so?
So, first question, people stay, I think, because of the stories we tell ourselves, or the stories that society
Mm,
has given us through either like the patriarchy or capitalism, just like what we achieve is our worth. So or people pleasing. And especially as women,
mm,
we are told that, we stay and we be nice and we do the things that are asked of
mm-hmm.
us because we have to be good little girls. Like, that was drilled into our head.
Yep.
So it's basically either they want to climb the corporate ladder, which if that's what you want to do, like go for it. But just please be aware of the downfalls or, the pendulum on that.
Right.
But yeah, it's just because we put our worth into our productivity and our achievements and our job titles and, making sure that everyone around us looks up to us or respects us. And the second question was,
what advice would you give for someone who is experiencing the workplace trauma, but they have that fear of, maybe they're afraid to set the boundaries because they're afraid of the repercussions. They're afraid to go to HR, or they're just afraid to walk away from the trauma, or in some cases, they may not even realize that it's trauma because we don't. It may have been just normal. It feels like normal. They've been in it for so long.
I think my advice would be, is this really how you want to live your life? And are your values aligned, your values and goals aligned with how you're living your life every single day? And I wish someone would have asked me that, and I would have been like, actually, no, like my goal is not to be traumatized every single day. My goal is to enjoy my life. And, sometimes when we're in it, we forget that, I was given the advice, the grass isn't always greener on the other side when I was trying to do this job. But the complete opposite is actually true. The grass is greener. Like you shouldn't tolerate this kind of abuse because you only have one beautiful life, and it's just how you want to live your life every single day. And I would just start taking the actions to make sure, you have an emergency fund set up and, just like taking all those actions so that you start looking for jobs, writing down everything, document everything. And so when you are ready to go to HR, anything and everything is documented, but you also have, a little nest egg for yourself to leave that job, because I think it's really easy and it's a privileged thing to say, oh, I can just go to another job, but that's not the reality for everyone. We all have bills to pay, we have lives, kids, like whatever we need. Like sometimes we can't just leave an abusive job right on the spot. So just always making sure like you're taking care of yourself first and setting everything up. So if the job's gone tomorrow, you're still you and you still have you. And that's the most important part for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. So what are the common hurdles that one might face when trying to infuse self-love into their professional life?
I know that the most, the hardest thing is even just believing that putting yourself first is not selfish, and just like we were just talking about, like we are given these stories that we're supposed to take care of others, put everyone before ourselves, and it's just not true. And it just benefits everyone. So just accept that loving yourself is a path to a new, happier, better life. And then of course, another hurdle is outside forces. You're going to have your boss or your partner or your kids that are just always going to get in the way of having that me self-love time. And, but at the end of the day, and this statement gave me so much freedom, is like the only person we can control is ourselves. And so we can control our boundaries. We can control how we react to people. We can control our self-worth. We can control our self-trust, like how we're caring for ourselves. Like all we can do is really control ourselves. And, I think those are kind of the two. I know it's really broad to say those are the two things, but it's really like ourselves getting in our way and then other people. And you start with the first one, getting out of your own way. And then, focusing on what you can control.
I really like where you said believing that putting yourself first is important, because I think one thing that I've learned in my journey of self-love is that you can't truly love someone else until you can love yourself first. So that is it's definitely a priority, should definitely be a priority for all of us. So thank you. And you talk about energy work as part of your journey. Now, how does that contribute to a more balanced work life?
Yeah. So that's, like more, I look at energy in two ways, and it's like your energy, right? Your essence and who you are. You're filling your own cup. So definitely taking care of yourself and finding joyful activities and, nourishing your body, finding movement, like that's all really important to show up with good energy. And then there's energy work, right? Like Reiki, EFT, emotional
Right.
freedom tapping, like those things that help. When you're stressed, energy gets trapped in your body, and that leads to a state of disease. So that's when like anxiety, depression, sickness. I used to be sick all the time, and that's because my body was
Wow.
like not functioning because I was so stressed. So through energy work is when you can, release those trapped emotions in your body for sure. So it just one with the filling your cup type of energy work that helps you just be a more positive, happy, healthy person. And
Okay.
you will set those boundaries to, make sure you're filling up your cup. And then the energy work as well. And that just helps with emotional regulation. So you're not spilling out all over everyone. Like literally, if someone would say one mean thing to me, I would start crying. I would just be like, bye. Because I used to travel for trade shows, and I remember the showroom manager was like, hey, like we kind of just want to like switch around the display a little bit to help the buyers like understand your brand more. And I was like, what did I do wrong? Like I'm like such a failure,
Wow.
and she was just like, this is going to help you. And now that I'm more emotionally regulated, I'm like, okay, cool. Like I would have been like, cool, that sounds like a great
Right.
idea. But since I was so trapped in my body, I just like couldn't handle even a little tiny negative thing being said like that. So it helps with regulation, stress management. We just always want to make sure that we are getting the trapped stagnant energy out of our bodies.
And I'm actually glad you really glad that you went into detail about the spillover. And so in your case, it was tears, sobbing. What are some other ways that trapped energy can spill over?
Oh, geez. Yelling. I have been screamed at by bosses before. And then other unhealthy coping mechanisms, like substance abuse and alcohol abuse, and also just kind of like isolating yourself too. And it's just when you don't know, I've never experienced physical abuse, but I'm sure it could come out in that way too. When you just don't know
Right.
how to like handle your emotions, you put hands on other people, and it just, that's obviously, I'm sure those people, and I didn't want to treat other people that way. So it's so
Right.
important to learn how to manage your emotions so you aren't spilling out over to other people, because now you're affecting their life. And
Right.
that's not fair because you don't know how to deal with yourself.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, for those that are listening, what are some immediate steps that they can take to start their healing journey in the context of workplace trauma?
I would say the number one thing is to connect, like just what we were talking about, connect back with your body and make sure that either if that's through tapping, if that's through movement, meditation, breath work, it's just a way to tap back into your body and your nervous system.
Mm,
Because when you are practicing, it's called interoceptive awareness. When you can just feel what's going on in your body, that really helps you regulate your emotions better. It helps you nourish your body better because you just know what you need. Interoceptive awareness is just knowing what your body needs. And it's like this intuition. So that's so important. Um, Another thing I would start doing is practicing gratitude. And that's something I never practiced before. And
right.
of course, you can do it in like a morning or nightly list, but I think
Mm-hmm.
gratitude is best practice in small moments throughout the day. Like, when do you need it? Say like, for instance, you're going into this kind of like PTSD spiral about the workplace trauma. And this isn't like a healing salve. Like, obviously you need to be doing other work besides gratitude, but it's just a way to like change your thoughts around, a particular instance. And, you could just tell yourself, oh, I'm so grateful for all the skills, that I learned at a job.
Yes.
I can take them to a new job. I'm grateful for my work family. They got me through, those hard times, and they're such amazing people. Or like, I'm grateful for myself for, being so strong during that time and standing up for myself and getting myself out of that situation. And it's definitely, not a way to be toxic positivity. It's a tool, that helps you transform your thoughts from negative into positive. And, and I would also say self-forgiveness is just so important. We need to forgive ourselves. It was one of the hardest things I went through. And it's one of the hardest things, that other people go through as well. And it's just, so what you can do is write a letter to your past self.
Yes.
And it's so powerful and it's so healing. And, it's just like, what did you used to believe? What were your belief systems? What habits did you form like during that time? And forgive yourself, because those are probably no longer serving you. And who do you want to be now? And how can we move forward? And it's hard to move forward without forgiving yourself first.
That is the last one, the self-forgiveness, but specifically the activity you mentioned of writing a letter to your past self. That is so helpful. Like, I did that for myself. And just getting all those thoughts out. So I don't know how it does it, but it definitely, it's like a relief. Like, it feels, it's like a release as well. But it feels really good, and it's kind of freeing to just get those thoughts that you've kept jumbled in, and those emotions that you've kept jumbled in out on a piece of paper, and just letting is a method of letting things go. I took mine a step further and tore them up because they were not serving me. But yeah, I really like that activity. It's a very good one. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, Lindsey, thank you so much. I have really enjoyed our discussion, and we are going to come back to it, but we're going to take another quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
We are on an incredible journey together, sharing stories of resilience, hope, and the power of healing. To extend the reach and impact of the You Are Not Your Trauma movement, we've launched the Give 5 to Change Lives campaign. With just $5, you can contribute to developing invaluable resources like our upcoming You Are Not Your Trauma app, healing journal, and expanded podcast content. Every dollar and every share contributes to helping bring healing and hope to more people. We invite you to join this movement. Visit giving.youarenotyourtrauma.com to contribute. Together, we can change lives one heart at a time.
Okay, we are back. So if you have been along for the ride during this episode, I've been talking to Lindsey, and we have been talking about workplace trauma, how it can just really change who you are, how it can really affect the person that you desire to be, and really how you can utilize self-love to undo some of that damage that was done from the workplace trauma. I truly believe this has been an incredible episode. And as I shared with you before we started recording, Lindsey, this is a topic that I've really wanted to talk about, because I feel like it's one that a lot of people don't even realize that they're experiencing. And it's because a lot of those little things that we experience, we don't put a name to them, right? So we're going through the experiences of the work, the overload of work, or overload of work, or the being yelled at, or the mistreatment, or, the sexism, the racism, all the different things, or someone belittling us or gaslighting us. All those things, we're going through them, and they're happening, like you mentioned before, at different times, and we don't realize the impact that it has on us as a whole. So this, talking about this was really something I felt like that needed to happen. And Lindsey, thank you so much for being willing to share.
You're so welcome. And, it happens more than we think to everyone. And it's, just such a bummer. And I really, hope that we can start even having these conversations, bringing that to the forefront, and hopefully people can realize, what's happening and stand up for themselves. And if they are the toxic leader, like I was, maybe start making some changes, because even the person above you might be super toxic, but you don't have to carry that down. And having all of these tools to, make an impact with the people that you're leading, or the people in your workplace, and all the people in your life. And it's important work, and it's hard work, but, it's totally worth it.
Well, thank you again. A huge, huge thank you to you, Lindsey, just for sharing your incredible journey, because I personally believe that sharing our lived experiences is really what helps people to grow, to learn more, to make different decisions. So it is my hope that someone who hears this episode, that needed to hear it, can grow from your experience. So I do appreciate you sharing your journey and your insights with me and all of our listeners. So Lindsey, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it a million times, I'll say it again, but this work is so important, and there's a beautiful human waiting for you on the other side, and you're a beautiful life. So just come do the work and, change your life.
I love it. I love it. Do the work. That is so important. And I'm glad you said that again, because it is important to do the work. We can hear about it all day long, but if we are not taking the action to do the work, we don't get the beautiful results on the other side. And I mean, we deserve that, right?
Exactly.
But to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. And as we wrap up today's episode, I'd like to leave you with this thought. And mending the scars of trauma is not just an act of healing, but an act of reclaiming your life. Self-love is the key that unlocks the door to a better you and a better world. Now, if you found today's episode helpful, please don't forget to share it with someone who can benefit from the information that was shared today. Also, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show. You can check out the website at www.youarenotyourtrauma.com to leave feedback, request to be a guest on the show, subscribe to the show, get information on our show guests, or to get information about advertising on You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. You can connect with the You Are Not Your Trauma podcast on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at You Are Not Your Trauma podcast. And if you have a story to share, please email me at contact@harrietmharris.com. Until next time, remember, your worth is not defined by your work, and you deserve to be in spaces that honor your humanity. And most importantly, remember that you are not your trauma.